Welcome, everyone, to Ladder Daily Digest. We honor creators, and I stumbled across a channel that's not new. It was new to me, though, and we welcome the Masked Mormon today.
Yay! Hey, welcome. We're so excited to have you on today because I've watched a lot of your content, and I'm really digging the whole mask thing. That's awesome.
Well, thank you so much for having me on.
Oh yeah, of course. We strive to always have quality guests on that will enhance anyone who watches our content. We feel that you have a lot to say that's of great value.
Well, thank you.
And for those of you watching, if you're watching this, would you do us the favor, not to be cliche, but like and subscribe? That's very important to us and to you, the viewers. We would greatly appreciate that. And you can find the Masked Mormon. Guess what his YouTube name is, Gene?
The Masked Seventh-day Adventist.
Nope, it's the Masked Mormon. And you can
Awesome.
find that on YouTube, and you'll see the content of which I speak.
And we'll provide a link in our description if anybody ever goes down. You just go below the video and click on more, where the name of the video is, and a whole world of opportunity can open before your
welcome
eyes.
Anybody who wants to experience my content, and I'll thank everybody in advance.
Great.
Masked Mormon, tell us what it was like when you were growing up. What were your early years like, the first, maybe leading up to deciding on college and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I was born in 1981. I always like to kind of give a reference in time during a story because it kind of helps give some perspective. So I was, what do they call me, an elder millennial? So born in 1981. I was born in northern Nevada, moved around quite a bit. My mom married my dad. Things didn't go too well, and so got divorced, and she remarried, and we moved to the middle of Montana, where I spent most of my developmental years, young childhood up till about halfway through high school.
So how far was a Walmart from where you grew up?
Ooh, that was the big city of Butte, Montana, 23 miles away.
That's always a good indicator.
Yeah.
If you can get along in an area, how far is the nearest Walmart?
Well, it's funny because sometimes people will say, "Well, my town only had one street light." Well, I always lived in towns that had no street lights. Mining and ranching were kind of the big industries where I lived. My stepdad worked at the local gold mine. We also had kind of a hobby farm. We owned 6 acres and raised pigs and alfalfa. And guess who got to muck out all the pig pens?
The Masked Mormon.
I did, yes.
It builds character.
It built something. And it's a smell you never quite forget. I do remember going to school dances and, not cleaning my shoes off enough. And so you get kind of the whiff of the pig pens sometimes. And it's like, oh man, not something that a teenage boy wants, especially as he's especially insecure about things as it is. But elementary school and middle school and first couple years of high school were spent in Montana. Were
you a Boy Scout?
I was not.
Okay.
I did join Cub Scouts for a couple of years, but didn't really stick with it. I did do 4-H, if you know what that is, for 3 or 4 years, and took a pig to the county fair each year, and so that was a lot of fun. But at the same time, very rural experience, but I was also big into reading and science fiction. We had a set of encyclopedias that I loved reading. I guess not a lot of people can, say that they read encyclopedias growing up, but I did. I especially loved whales and space and dinosaurs and stuff like that. So pretty stereotypically for a boy, I guess. Rode my
Did you
bike
read-
everywhere.
Did you read other things like Mark Twain, Tom Sawyer, or anything like that?
Just a little bit. I did do like Michael Crichton. I loved Jurassic Park and Sphere. Those two books scared me like nothing else. I was big into Dune. I never read the book until I was in high school, but I had the Dune encyclopedia
Oh, no
that I went
kidding.
through. Yeah, so I went through that pretty extensively, just learning the lore and stuff like that. I really like world building kind of things.
Did you read the Book of Mormon or the Bible?
I read the Bible actually. So my family wasn't terribly religious, although we did go to a school, to a church for several years growing up, just kind of some Christian church in town. And so I kind of had, I guess, kind of a spiritual foundation of sorts. Was taught about the Bible, how important it was. And so in 7th grade, I decided to just read the Bible, cover to cover, and find out what this was all about. And
It's got to be as exciting as encyclopedias.
More so in some ways. I remember reading and being kind of appalled by the story of Lot and his daughters, and all of the genocide that happened. Like, even as a 7th and 8th grader, I understood just like how kind of awful some of the things in the Old Testament were. And I was actually telling Gina,
all done by our loving Father in heaven.
Exactly.
Hashtag Songs of Solomon. That's like Bible porn.
Yeah. And I, as I was getting into like Deuteronomy and all the law chapters, I remember, it was talking about making sacrifices and how important that was, and how God enjoyed the savor of, sacrifices, or whatever, however it described it. And so as a very impressionable boy, I was like, do I need to start making sacrifices? And it's like, it's in the book. And I was like, starting to think about like logistics. It's like, I can't afford a bull, even though like they want you to do a bull or whatever, but they're talking about birds. Maybe I should, build an altar and sacrifice a bird or something like that.
Maybe a pig. Maybe stop showing your pig at the fair and sacrifice that.
I knew my parents would not be down for that. But fortunately, I got to the New Testament before I actually did anything like that, and understood that sacrifices weren't needed anymore. But it did leave an impression on me, as far as again, people that actually read and understand the Bible. It's like, maybe the Bible isn't a safe thing for impressionable people, especially for children. Because here I was being like, if this is important, maybe this is something I should be. Why isn't nobody else doing this? Fortunately, I got to the part where it said, why we aren't doing this. But if I stopped at the Old Testament, I never would have found that out.
And your pigs would be in jeopardy.
Yes. Yeah. And again, just for any viewers, no, I did not actually sacrifice any animals or anything like that.
No animals were harmed during the making of the Masked Mormon.
No. But it did leave a lasting impression. And also just a lot of the, I guess, cultural shame sorts of things that can kind of just be natural with a lot of religions, kind of just naturally bore out, as far as, as a teenage boy, things start developing, you start having certain drives and things like that, and feeling guilty for those. It's like, well, maybe God doesn't like me, being so attracted to all these girls, or, wanting to explore certain things. I kind of naturally built a lot of that stuff, even just without kind of a church influence or whatever. So it's kind of interesting how naturally that can develop out of certain
Holy Scripture.
Yeah, exactly.
And if they would tell us the real meanings behind the things, like the sacrifices were basically just so that the priests could eat.
Yeah.
That is evident today, where organizations command the members to do things to help the organization, not necessarily for their eternal salvation.
Yeah. But I did have run-ins with Mormonism even when I was younger. Come to find out, like years later, but my stepdad, apparently his family grew up Mormon. And, he had left the church and never talked about it, but we had missionaries that would visit occasionally. So we had a few copies of the Book of Mormon, and I didn't really understand the difference between the Bible and the Book of Mormon. I would just kind of flip through it, and it was, similar format. And, I would always wonder who the Alma lady was, but didn't really register that they were different. And then we'd also have like the Jehovah's Witnesses come occasionally. I remember having a book of Bible stories written by the Jehovah's Witnesses, and they, like Mormonism, they have a very distinct art style, and so I was kind of used to their art style sort of thing. But then, like with Mormonism, it was interesting seeing similarities between the two, but also just how different they were. And so that took me up until 8th grade. I got into high school, and we moved to another town in Montana, probably because of just my own natural inclinations, but also just kind of, reading the Bible and stuff like that. I was a pretty straight-laced kid. And so, moving to a new town, didn't know anybody. And Mormons are generally fairly social people. And so I kind of fell in with the Mormon kids. And they started inviting me to church and to stake dances and things like that. And I was actually kind of one of the things that my mom taught me how to do was how to dance. And she was like, girls like a guy that can dance. And so I took that to heart. And it was something that paid off during, stake dances and stuff like that. So I was pretty popular there, as far as like being able to, ask people to dance and them actually saying yes. Come to find out that, maybe sometimes that there was girls were told never to say no, but
we were going to actually ask you to maybe do a dance number for us here on the show.
I'm more into ballroom and swing dancing.
So did you ever dip somebody during a church dance?
Yes. And I did with the swing dancing, I could do a lot of the aerials and the flips and things like that. And so, again, that kind of thing.
They could have made a movie about you, like Dirty Dancing or something like that.
Yeah.
That there's 2 of the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives people, whatever you call them, the girls on Dancing with the Stars this season.
Oh, yeah.
There's 2 of them. Yeah.
I did not know that.
We'll see if they get bigger ratings for having Mormons on it, because Mormons are popular.
Yeah.
Especially those Mormons. And I guarantee you that the network is putting them on the show for ratings.
Yeah.
Because I know that we're going to watch this season. Just
yeah.
You
kind of have to, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
So then do missionaries get invited to your house?
Eventually. So freshman and sophomore years of high school, like I attended church about every other week. And because I didn't understand all of Mormonism, I was like, whatever church I'm going to I'm a member of that church. Right. And there was I remember this girl I wanted to date, and she's like, well, I only date Mormons. So it's like, well, I'm a Mormon, not knowing, there's a process to become Mormon. Right. And,
you were a dry Mormon is what they would say at the time.
Yeah. So eventually we moved back to Nevada, about halfway through my sophomore year in high school. Again, fell in with the Mormon kids, and that's kind of where the missionaries got involved. Because they kind of understood. It's like, well, yeah, he's going to church, but he's not baptized. So let's kind of get this. So there were a couple of sister missionaries that had to drive, what was it? Like 2 hours from like where they were. Like, as I was in the middle of nowhere, Nevada, just right in the middle of the state, kind of a town where horror movies happen, just one of those deserted towns out in the middle of nowhere. And
These sister missionaries had to drive 2 hours to give you a discussion.
yes.
Holy crap.
I know. Think of what they were talking about on the way and on the way back.
Yeah.
Could have been anything, or could have been like what the sisters in Heretic talked about.
They had plenty of time for sure. But I remember, kind of being resistant to some of the teachings, but at the same time, because like I was also becoming, I guess, indoctrinated through discussions with friends and things like that. Like, it just seemed to make sense. And my mom, even though she wasn't really religious, she felt that there was an importance of getting baptized somewhere. And so when the sisters suggested I get baptized, she was kind of for it. So yeah, I joined the church. One of the things that especially interested me was the sisters didn't teach this, but as I was talking with friends, all of the deep doctrine stuff kind of comes out, right? And they started talking about becoming gods, and that actually appealed to me because I'm like,
Yeah.
who wouldn't want to become a god? I'm big into Star Trek. Anybody who kind of talks to me for any bit of time, like if they want to talk Star Trek, I can talk the history and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of a big thing for me. So it was just kind of part of who I am. And one of my favorite characters was Q. Anybody who's familiar with Next Generation, a godlike being. And I was like, I would like to be a Q if I could be anything on Star Trek. And so come to find
Kind of
out,
like a modern version of Loki.
yeah. But, you snap your fingers and, godlike things happen. And so when the Mormons were like, hey, you can become a god, I was like, sign me up. Granted, there were certain aspects of the culture that I still kind of butted up against. Like I wasn't so on board with tithing or other things, but
you weren't even thinking that becoming a god meant eternal sex.
That did not even cross my mind at all, actually.
Yeah.
I didn't even know anything about polygamy or anything like that. But yeah, I guess it's interesting just the certain things that draw people to Mormonism. My wife, the Masked Mistress, her family, they were RLDS and joined the church as in the 80s when the RLDS church was kind of starting to do a lot of changes. And what was really important to like her dad and her family in general were just the concept of eternal families and temple marriage and things like that. And so that's kind of what brought them, me, I wanted to become a god. Them, they wanted, eternal families. And, just like all these different paths that bring people in for various different reasons. It's kind of interesting.
Right. And you were 18 when you were baptized?
Say that again?
You were 18 when you were baptized?
I was 17.
17, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was incorporated into my little branch pretty readily. There weren't very many priests. And so I was kind of incorporated into preparing the sacrament. So I kind of felt important enough that I had to be there because people depended on me to, get the sacrament ready and to bless it and all that kind of stuff. And there was a lot of social,
it's all part of the training to become a god.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there was a lot of social
God Academy. Yeah.
Yeah. But there was a lot of social, I don't want to say pressure, but there was a lot of social support, I guess, kind of incorporating me into the branch. So they were like my friends, but then there were like the old guys in the ward that kind of, or in the branch that would encourage you and kind of be kind of like mentors, I guess. In some ways, the church doing its things right as far as, bringing somebody in and, buoying them up sort of thing. And so I fit really well. There were certain aspects of the culture that didn't really, I didn't really get. There's certain shibboleths in Mormonism that I was still kind of blind to. Like every Sunday I wore a lavender shirt to church. I didn't get any of the memos that, the uniform of the priesthood is to wear a white shirt.
They were just happy to have you there.
They were. And then, I kind of took that to BYU where I did my undergrad. I had a bunch of shirts of various colors, and every time I went to church, I would wear, these different colored shirts, not realizing that probably, the bishops and other ward members were probably judging me, thinking I was being rebellious and not complying with, all the unwritten rules of Mormonism.
And I think that, leaders know that if somebody's recently baptized, they're not going to have a whole closet full of white shirts and stuff like that. And so but maybe the contemporary people might be a little bit more judgy because they had to wear, the uniform.
Yeah.
You could have been like Gene. What he does is he wears shirts that have every single color on them. And so he only needs that one shirt.
There
and
you
he's
go.
accomplished that. Yeah.
Goes with everything.
You put it through a prism and, it becomes a white shirt, right?
Right.
Is the white shirt really a common thing at BYU?
At least it was when I was. I'm not sure if it's been changing in recent years, but I attended BYU from 2000 to 2007. And it was definitely highly encouraged, as I kind of eventually came to find out. But
and what was your major?
I studied physics for my undergrad.
And then also there were some pressures, I guess, for you to go on a mission.
Yeah. It seemed like I was barely dry from my baptism when people started encouraging me and almost feeling like there was some pressure for me to go on a mission. And I was like, I don't know anything about this church and you want me to go out preaching it? You got to be kidding, right? And, I figured, since I, joined, later in life, I kind of had a buy, right? Kind of this get out of, I don't want to say jail free, but, get out of this path, because I don't have to serve a mission because I just found out about it. But going to BYU, you find out really quickly that there's, there's no,
relief.
There's no relief and there's no valid excuse, especially if you want to date and things like that, which
high expectations.
Yeah. And it made dating and even friendships kind of difficult at times because like somebody would come up and talk to me, especially women, they would come up and talk to me. And one of the questions they asked me is like, so what's your major? When are you putting your mission papers in? And like, once I said, I'm not going to go on a mission, you could just see like their faces change and then they lost interest and they just left.
They're looking around the room for some other guy they can talk to.
Yep. And so that on top of like a lot of the pressure really put a kind of a bad taste in my mouth about actually wanting to go.
You never said, I'm going to serve a mission, but right now I'm focused on being a missionary to you.
That might have been really good.
If only I had that game 40 years ago.
I did not have any game for sure. One of the jokes in the physics department was, there were a few women that would study physics as well. And they would joke around, that the odds are good, but the goods are odd.
Yeah.
I've heard about people that study physics on purpose. And so I'm glad to be talking to someone because what that tells me there is that you are incredibly intelligent. Because
some might say so.
Physics was, I don't know. What do you do now? And I'm not trying to skip ahead, but I'm just curious. Are you in the aero industry?
Space. Yeah, I'm in the aerospace industry. So just kind of jumping a little bit, I wanted to be an astronomer, but realized that there's not much going for that. So I was like, okay, I'll do physics. Realize that that's kind of hard to, do physics in forever. And I took a fluid mechanics class my senior year of my undergrad in the mechanical engineering department. Loved it. And so I did a master's in mechanical engineering. About halfway through that, I realized let's go ahead and go all the way with this. And I did a PhD in aeronautical engineering.
You're a freaking rocket scientist.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That's
so,
incredible.
and yeah, now I work in the aerospace industry.
There you go.
Wonderful.
And so you decided that you want to date in the future. So you decide a mission might be the ticket.
Well, kind of how it happened was I met who would become my wife, the mass mistress. But we were in the same ward our sophomore year. And every Sunday there would be kind of just this get together of the ward. They'd, sing some hymns, have some prayer and announcements and things like that. And people would just kind of mill around and socialize afterwards. And so she started talking to me, and, we kind of just hit it off socially. And, the question comes up, so when are you going to go on a mission? And I said, I'm not. And she's like, I respect that. And it just stopped me. I was like, whoa, no woman has ever said that.
Yeah, she's a keeper.
Yeah. Granted, she did have a boyfriend at the time. But he was going on a mission. So if you have a boyfriend, but he's going on a mission, do you really have a boyfriend?
You didn't even have to be the
Right.
prophet to send that guy on a mission so that you could date her.
I did not. But another one of the things I really love doing is going to the gym. I might not be the biggest podcaster, but I'm the strongest podcaster.
There you go.
Yeah. You and Renee Stillman.
There's a lot of physics around guns.
Yeah. But she was doing something in the phys ed program and wanted kind of some help in the gym. And so we started hanging out together and became friends. And I kind of have this tendency of being able to fall for somebody pretty quickly. And so I was like, oh no, what's going on here? Like, cause I started catching feelings for her. But she made it very clear that we're just going to be friends. And so I did what every any person who wanted to just kind of bide their time, I lied to her and said, like, yeah, I just want to be friends too. But
the friend zone.
Yeah. But this is one of those cases where it actually worked out. Cause we were really close friends. We spoke all the time. We communicated really well together. And I was just kind of there for her a lot, just as kind of as our relationship developed. Eventually, though, I started realizing it's like, my university experience is passing me by and I've really not dated anybody. And so I started dating this other woman. She got jealous. And my wife, the mass mistress, became jealous. And so she started kind of sabotaging our relationship. And so this other woman kind of became, and she's like, well, y'all have history together, you're great friends and stuff like that. I don't know if I can compete with that. So other woman broke up with me. Eventually, we started dating. And then by this time I decided I would go ahead and go on a mission. She was going to go on a mission as well. And so we served at the same time, actually.
Wow.
I went to Ohio and she went to Salt Lake City. We served contemporary to each other, and which made it kind of nice because we had this shared experience, but we also we kind of knew that we were going to marry each other, but it also kind of took some of the pressure off, I guess.
So when she served in Salt Lake City, did she serve at the temple?
No, she was in Salt Lake City South. Okay. So I think that covers like down to Point of the Mountain and then the southern part of the city.
Was she studying the same? Was she in the same field as you?
No, she was doing phys ed, and then when she got back, she started studying English. She gets back about 6 months before me, and then I get back, and so because my family aren't members, somehow my return date just didn't get to them. So I get off my mission and I am at the airport in Nevada waiting for somebody to pick me up, and nobody came.
Oh no. That's horrible.
I ended up having to take a taxi home. One of my brothers gets home from school and he's like, "Oh, you're home now." my wife, she,
That's almost worse than when the family moves without you knowing it,
yeah.
because they're there and they still don't know you're coming.
My wife knew I
I-
was coming home, but she didn't want to kind of step on family toes or whatever. So she didn't want to be there when I got home. So she came that weekend. So the whole, family not being there, like my mom felt bad and apologized profusely, but it's one of those things that's kind of funny now. But
I really seriously, it hurts my heart a little
yeah,
that you didn't have, the traditional homecoming.
yeah.
Um,
Well,
that's
and
because, it's kind of a climactic moment.
it
And
was, yeah.
yeah,
And as I kind of reflected on the mission, they talk about it being the best 2 years of your life, and it opens up all these opportunities. And I came to realize, like, the mission really kind of didn't mean anything, because it doesn't really set you up for anything in the church, besides making you marriageable material. It doesn't open up calling opportunities or leadership opportunities, really. And it ends up, yeah, just being kind of this thing you do that is really important. Then once you do it, you check that mark or you check that box, and then people just kind of move on. It's like, okay, now go do the next thing.
A lot of people say that missions are to convert the missionary, to keep
Yep.
them in, and you were kind of seeing that you had some nice experiences or whatever, but it didn't really advance you personally as much as the promise was.
Yeah, because I went a little older, so I had like life experience behind me. So it's not like I learned how to do that. I made some relationships that continued to today, and then, yeah, my mission president explicitly said that the mission was its main purpose was to convert the missionary, and so, which at the time seemed reasonable, because I was like, okay, that makes sense, I guess. But yeah, it didn't ultimately buy anything except taking up 2 years where I could have gotten ahead. I think I did an analysis on one of my videos about the cost of a mission, besides the $10,000-ish that you have to pay for the mission itself. It also takes time, which you kind of have to subtract from the end of your working life.
Opportunity costs.
Exactly. Because, like, everybody kind of starts the same as far as like how their salary goes or whatever. But because you have 2 fewer years, you kind of have to factor in. So, like, assuming you at the end of your career make $100,000 a year, just for simplicity purposes, like the cost of that mission is that $200,000 plus the the time, and plus the the $10,000. So it's a very expensive.
And a lot of times at the end of your life, if you're making 100,000 and your raise is 5%, that's $5,000. So you miss out on $10,000 of raises at the end, which also bumps up your retirement usually.
Yeah. So I get home, and I knew I was going to marry my wife, Mass Mistress. I had put some money aside for an engagement ring, and I was like, maybe I'll just go look at rings. I kind of knew what she wanted. She wanted like white gold and stuff like that. And here I am, back off my mission for a day and a half, and I buy a ring.
Wow.
She's going to come the next day, and it won't be ready until after she comes. And so, I tell my mom, like, okay, can you take her to, do a pedicure or something like that, so I can go pick up this ring? And I pick her up at the airport. We get, we're all lovey-dovey, kissy kind of thing. And then I say, you're going to go with my mom for a few hours and do this pedicure, manicure sort of thing. And she's like, I haven't seen you for 2 years, and you're going to, pawn me off on your mom for a little while. But it ended up, we had afterwards, kind of a great day together. We ended up at the temple in Las Vegas, where my family is. And I proposed to her on the temple grounds there. And so, yeah, this was, I'd been off my mission 3 days, and here I am engaged.
Well, you did what the church counseled you to do.
Yeah, the white
Go home
missionary
and get
handbook
married.
says when you're transferred to a new area, find your new companion without delay. So when I called up my mission president and told him, he was somewhat concerned because I hadn't really talked about her at all, even though we were writing and stuff like that. I kind of kept that close to the chest. And he's like, Elder, did you know this girl? He's like, yes, we've got some history. And then 3 months later, we were married in the Houston temple where she's from.
You could say, yes, I spotted for her in the gym.
Yes. And then as far as our life in the church, one of the things that, like, even though I think the church was made for me and I fit fairly well, as far as, I'm a man, the church is kind of man-centric, right? I still kind of brushed up against some of the unexpected or unwritten rules of the church. And even my wife, she kind of had these expectations of me kind of imposed on her by the church, especially patriarchal expectations. It's like, you're going to, she wouldn't say this, but, rule over her, but that's kind of what she expected. And I was like, why would I do that? Why would I, like, aren't we kind of equals? Like, what? And so there were kind of just certain cultural aspects of the church that I didn't really fit well with. And that was always the case. Like, I remember when I was in seminary, in high school, they started talking about, like, the flood, Noah's flood, and the Genesis creation story. And I was like, I don't believe that. There's no evidence for it. As a science based kind of guy, I was like, well, that just sounds like a mythological story. But of course, this was the 90s and early 2000s, so there's a lot of young earth creationism and a lot of literalness associated with kind of a lot of the ways that scriptures were taught.
And so you were growing your family, and what kind of callings did you have at the same time?
I was a ward mission leader. I was a secretary in several of, like, the presidencies, like a Sunday school presidency, and then I became a counselor in an elders quorum, and then eventually, after we moved to Florida, I was an elders quorum president. So those were, like, my big ones. And then
that is a biggie.
By the time I was an elders quorum president, that's kind of when I was really in the midst of my questioning and deconstruction kind of stuff.
This is like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And what things were you questioning at first?
Mormonism is one of those religions that it makes a lot of claims that are falsifiable, testable. It talks about, miraculous healings. If the priesthood can heal people, you should be able to see certain things. If there's these certain gifts of the Spirit that you should see certain things reflected in the world if these things are actually the case. And I wasn't seeing those things. And so at first I started blaming myself. It's like, well, maybe there's something wrong with me, or maybe there's some aspect that I'm not understanding. Whatever the case may be, it was like, it's my fault if I'm not seeing this stuff.
So you're saying not even a rocket scientist can understand some of Mormonism?
I guess so. And then at the same time, I started realizing that there was really no progression in the church as far as like in Sunday school, the same lessons would be taught over and over again. And every 4 years, everything was on repeat. I would remember, it's like, my first time through the Sunday school curriculum, I was like, oh, this is interesting. This is exciting. Mormonism has all these answers. And I love answers. Like, that's another thing that drew me to Mormonism, was it had answers to all these questions. I started realizing that there was never any other answers.
Right. And your questions were growing and the answers all remained the same.
Exactly. And like in Sunday school,
Right.
you'd every 4 years, I started noticing like the same questions would be asked and the same responses were expected. And so I would try to ask these more deep reaching questions, and people would either brush it off or say, well, we don't understand that now, or there was never any answers.
So
There
you
was
had to
never...
look somewhere else to find your answers. Did you start looking elsewhere?
Eventually, I started trying to dig more deeply myself. I remember one of the first things I was trying to explore is like, okay, the Book of Mormon claims to be the story of this journey, right? That's how it starts out. It's like, okay, so if this journey actually happened, what was most likely? In as far as how I was taught, like it was assumed that they took off from the Arabian Peninsula, booked it across the Indian Ocean, across Pacific, and landed somewhere in South America. I was like, well, that seems very unlikely. That's a kind of impossible journey. So I was like, okay, if you look at the currents in the oceans, like, okay, so they probably hugged the coast of Africa and went south and then back north again, and then made a crossing into South America. And because they were following the law of Moses, they would have wanted to have the same seasons and constellations in the sky, so they would probably be somewhere in the northern hemisphere. And so at least that kind of made things more real as far as like exploring some of the implications of, okay, there's these claims in this book, how could it have actually happened? And then as I started exploring that more, you start kind of poking holes in it, and it doesn't hold water. Like, it's not tight like unto a dish. But I remember the first thing I allowed myself to question, it felt safe anyway, was again, kind of going back to the Old Testament, Noah and the flood. I was like, okay, this is an impossible story for all of these reasons. So this is actually not history, kind of a thing. And I started talking to my wife, the masked mistress, about it, and she was like, whoa, this is dangerous territory you're delving into. And there was a lot of friction between us for a while, because here I am trying to dig deeply but also question at the same time. But she's like, this doesn't feel safe. But eventually, because we've always had a lot of open communication, we sat down to watch the movie Noah. I don't know if you remember this movie from years ago. Had Russell Crowe. It's a terrible movie. But at the very first title card of that, there's a
disclaimer.
Not a disclaimer, but it's like a
exposition, like a
some
story.
exposition thing, yeah. And I was like, no. And she's like, what do you mean? And so then we proceed to have like this 3-hour conversation about like just this title card. And she started understanding kind of my perspective a little bit.
So did you like stop the movie right there, or did you watch the whole movie and then go back to the title card?
We stopped the movie right there. Like, it's 5 seconds into the movie. I said, no, that's not right. She's like, what do you mean? So we
you mentioned you had
movie plans.
You mentioned you had pigs and you'd have to muck out their pens.
Yep.
Can you imagine if these pigs were in an ark and no mucking out any pens?
Everybody would have the same shoes.
Yeah.
How much waste they would produce. And that's just the pigs.
Yeah.
You got every animal doing the same thing. I have a little issue with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a problem with that.
Yeah.
But, well, it's like Nephi and his family crossing the ocean. Where do they poop?
Yeah. Yeah. Where
does all the waste go? How do they pee?
How are they getting along on day 2 of their 350-day journey?
What's even worse is the Jaredite journey, because, if they're in these submarines, exactly, where does all that stuff go, right?
And then if it's tight like over, a dish, how about oxygen?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. But yeah, like I tried to make Mormonism work as much as possible. Like, because again, there was like this social aspect that, it really buoys you up. Like there's this, wherever you move somewhere, like there's just like this community that you have that's just kind of automatic. So I've got 3 kids, all girls. And the first 2 were born with cystic fibrosis. And we find out about our first one, she's about 6 weeks old, and she was a large baby when she was born, but she just didn't grow because cystic fibrosis is one of those things where you have a hard time
Oxygenating.
well, there can be that, but also absorbing nutrients from your food. And so she just wasn't growing. And so we went to, this is when we were living in Utah. So we went up to Primary Children's. Utah had just started doing infant screenings like the month she was born. And so she'd been born a month earlier, we might not have even caught it before, a lot of other problems started happening. But she was about 6 weeks old, and that's about the time that a person will kind of give a blessing to their child as well. And so my father-in-law came in to town for that. And I remember him explicitly asking, as I was preparing for her blessing, it's like, so are you going to heal her? Like, even at this time when I was still fully believing, I was like, I've never seen a healing before. And, perhaps there's a reason for God giving her this thing. And so it's like, no, I'm not going to heal her. But it did just make me think, it's like, why would I not just, like, if I've got this power, why would I not try to do that? Because I probably deep inside, I knew that there was no actual power there, even though I wouldn't let myself really admit it to myself.
Right. It's like, well, there could be a chance.
Yeah. And sometimes that's enough for people. It's like, well, I remember when I was I must have been 2 or 3, and I really wanted to fly. Fortunately, I didn't do like the Superman thing and jump off something high. I was like, okay, let's do this safely. So I climbed up on the toilet in the bathroom, and I flapped my arms really, really fast and jumped off the toilet. And I was convinced for a second I hung in the air, and before I landed back on the ground. And I was like, okay, I flew. I know I can do it. I don't have to do anything else. And so I just kind of went on with my life there. Again, probably knowing deep inside, it's like, no, I didn't really fly, but I want to convince myself that I did. But I think that's kind of what it's like with Mormonism. It's like, you want to convince yourself. It's like, well, a person, I laid my hands on somebody's head. They were sick. They got better. There's priesthood power there, right? Or
right. Even though every day billions of people get sick, and a week later they're healed anyway.
Yep.
No blessings.
If you have the faith of a mustard seed, you can move mountains.
Yep.
Or you can become mustard.
Yeah. So healing a child should be simple. I've often
and it should be what God wants.
Exactly.
I have often wondered why the prophet, with all of his power, all of his keys, doesn't go to the children's hospital and just go through the hallways and heal these kids.
That's what Jesus would have done.
That's right?
Yeah. Well, I remember the most unethical thing I did on my mission was nothing actually bad, but it was kind of related to that. There was this couple that we knew. They were members, but they were kind of coming back to activity. She was struggling through infertility. And so our mission president, he said that, if somebody comes to you asking for a blessing, bless them with what they want, unless the Spirit purposely stops you. So I'm like, okay, that sounds reasonable.
Default position is to heal.
Exactly. And so I remember my companion and I like laying hands on her head and blessing her that, she would have children. And maybe it's just my lack of faith. I don't know. But I was just like, afterwards, I just felt kind of dirty because like, I don't know if she, like, I lost track of this family. So I don't know if she was eventually able to have children or not. But at the same time, I was like, I gave her probably a lot of false hope. Because again, who am I? Like, this 22-year-old man, I've never been married. I've never, I'm putting my hands on her head to give her this blessing, and she's expecting what I say to actually happen. And it's just like, I just felt so dirty. It's like, oh.
Right. And believers will then 7 or 8 years later, when they adopt, say, oh, see, it did work. I am a mother now. I do have children.
They'll
or
have
in the
kids
eternity.
in the hereafter.
Yeah.
Or they'll have children in the hereafter. There you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, they make it work. They make
Yeah.
it work.
So it comes to a head, and what happens then?
Yeah. So I was really I happened upon Bill Reel's podcast. I listened to a few Mormon stories, but at the time, I was more drawn to Bill Reel because he was trying to make it work at the time. This was before his excommunication. He was trying to make it work, trying to find a faithful way to be questioning. I was like, oh, that speaks to me.
2015 and 2016.
Yep. Then the policy of exclusion comes out, and I was like, that just feels so wrong. So 2015, the children of gay members, can't be baptized or whatever, or they have to renounce their parents if they want to join the church. And it's like that totally flies in the face of agency and the articles of faith about a man being punished for his own sins.
And Jesus saying, "Bring your children here," except for the gay ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
In the book.
Luckily, God changed his mind on that.
That's right.
Luckily, yeah. Just 4 years later, right? And I'd also always had a problem with tithing. Like we always tithed. I remember a friend when I was in high school saying that you can't go to the celestial kingdom unless you pay tithing. And so I was like, ooh, that sounds. So I went home right from there, and all the money I had, I went ahead and divided out a tithe. But then once I started,
it's just a little bit of money, and it buys you a mansion in heaven.
Exactly. But then once I started, having a real job, started realizing like this is a huge part of like if only we had a few hundred extra dollars, which would amount to like the tithing I paid. I was a grad student, so I didn't make a lot of money as it was. Just a few hundred extra dollars would help us with more groceries, or being able to see family, or being able to do any number of things besides pay the church. But still feeling it was important until like I came across an article by Rock Waterman about, are we paying too much tithing is what the title of the article is. And I read it and I was like, it's backed up with, all these historical sources. I'm like, yeah. And so I presented it to my wife. It's like, this is how tithing was meant to be. And so for probably about a year, like we would pay tithing on our surplus instead of our gross or on our net. And I was like, it makes it more deliberate because I have to go through my finances and be like, okay, what is my excess? And so it felt like it made it more of a devotional sort of thing, as far as like, it's not just automatic 10% of what goes to my bank account. Like I have to be like, okay, was this a need or was this a want? And so for a little while,
it made it budgeting and stuff like that.
And it made it kind of work, and it made it kind of feel better. But then at the same time, I was like, but Mormonism isn't delivering on its promises. And so, all this time, I was trying desperately to, hold on to faith somehow. But it just wasn't bearing out.
Did you know where your tithing was going? Did you know what your tithing was used for?
No, I was of the opinion at the time, was like, well, once I let it go, the church can do with it what it wants. I've since changed that opinion because that's kind of sacred money. That's people's potential retirements or people's resources or things like that. And so it's like, I've changed that. But at the time, I was like, it's out of my hands now. I've done my duty for God and church, and
you trust in the Lord's servants.
Yeah. So things were just kind of unraveling over, the 20 teens. I started realizing, things like Word of Wisdom didn't make sense. And so I started drinking coffee.
Right. Didn't make sense as a commandment. It makes total sense as a word of wisdom. It's like, hey, do this if it fits your lifestyle.
Yep.
Well, there goes your eternal salvation.
Cup of coffee.
But coffee, it's delicious to the taste and very desirable.
Oh, yeah.
I'm convinced that that's probably what the fruit that Eve handed Adam was. It was a coffee cherry.
I
Especially
guess you can. I
Starbucks.
guess you can have that because I know that manna from heaven was Captain Crunch. So, I'll accept coffee in the Garden of Eden.
Yeah.
There you go.
But yeah, we were still going to church, and at the same time, I was like, I wasn't believing by this time, but because it was just kind of part of our routine, and because my wife was still kind of believing or whatever, she kind of had her own journey out. Well, I'll mention that in a second. But I remember, because Sunday school was always painful for me, but it became especially so as I would raise my hand and be like, well, what about this? And what about that? And I remember the Sunday school president took me aside one day. It's like, so what's going on? What's wrong? And I was just like, it's called Sunday school, but there's no school that happens. I'm repeating the 5th grade over and over again. Like,
That's right.
you know
And
how I
God
feel.
blessed me with a brain, and I'm using it. Is that bad?
Yeah. And so that day I decided, I'm not going to go to Sunday school anymore, because it's not value added to my life. It's obviously not value added to anybody else in the room. And then I felt the same way about fast and testimony meeting. I was like, this is just painful. I'm not going to go to this anymore. So bit by bit, it was just like extracting myself from things where I just didn't feel like there was any value added. A believing member will of course say that, you go to the church for, the sacrament, it's not meant to serve you, you're meant to serve it. But it's like, no, it has to be a two-way street. If there's a church is a relationship, just like anything else, like it should add value to your life. And if it doesn't, there's no reason to keep on with it. And then COVID happens, and it made for kind of a clean break for us, because by this time the mass mistress wasn't really believing anymore. I wasn't believing anymore, and we just kind of had this excuse because we have 2 kids with this chronic illness. And so it's like, well, we can, not attend church.
COVID gave everybody a get out of church free card.
And it ended up being a very helpful aspect as well, because I was kind of in my angry phase around that time as well. And, as somebody changes their relationship with something, or they lose something, or some relationship, or like a death in the family or whatever, which I considered, my loss of faith in Mormonism kind of like a death. People go through, phases of grief. And part of one of those phases is anger. And had I had to go to church during my angry phase, it would have kind of unloaded on other people. And an angry, non-believing Mormon is something to be avoided, right? And so I was able to kind of work through some of that and kind of come to a stable place where it's like, okay, I can talk about this. I can have my experiences. I'm past that anger for the most part. There's still some things that really ire me and anger me, especially with some of the abuse stuff that's been going on, and the money stuff, and all that. But
can I share an idea real quick with you? As I matured in my life, some of the funds that I was able to earn, I would invest, and I expected something back, obviously, from the money that I put in. I expected a return that would be better than what I initially invested. And I feel like with the church, not only financially, but your time, your talents, all of your efforts, all of your dedication, it's like investing, but where is the return?
Yeah.
Where's the what blessing? There's no visible return for that. And so I think that causes a great deal of anger as people things start to click in their mind, and they're like, wait a minute, it's like if I gave a big bunch of money, and this unfortunately has happened to me, I invest $10,000 here, and suddenly I lose it. It's gone.
Where are my promised blessings?
It pisses me off. I get angry. I get mad. And I think that's kind of how it is with the church. there's no return on the investment.
Yeah. Not until after you're dead, right?
That's right. And
Well,
Randy,
yeah, that's
I'm going to propose
what
to
they
you
say.
that if you lend me $10,000 in the afterlife, I promise to give you 100,000. Will you do that?
It's like, give me a burger today and I'll mow your lawn on Tuesday, or however that goes from
Yeah, yeah.
Popeye.
I gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today.
Hamburgers today. Yeah.
Right. And Tuesday never comes.
Yep.
That's right.
Yeah. There's a joke on Star Trek Generations at the very beginning. I don't know if you've seen the movie, but the new Enterprise is coming out of space dock and they have to go to this emergency, and it's missing all this equipment. And they're like, well, it doesn't get installed until Tuesday.
That's right.
Tim Rathbone would love to chat with you, by the way, because he's a Star Trek fanatic.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've seen Tim around on various things,
Yep.
but he's a Star Trek. I think he knows about everything there is to know about Star Trek.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're almost to the point where you become the Masked Mormon, I think.
What was that, 4 years ago? So yeah, 2021. So this was just as we're kind of coming out of COVID. I was, wanting to create something like, I consume a lot of media as far as, movies. Like one of the things I loved growing up was movies and television shows and things like that. And I was like, I consume a lot. I kind of want to create something, something that can, as I'm coming out of Mormonism, one of the things I had to kind of come to realize is this life is the only thing that's guaranteed. And if I want something of me to maybe persist beyond just, speaking something into the wind, like I want to do something creative. And so I was doing dishes one day, just kind of had elbow deep in dishwater and just kind of thinking about things. Usually when I'm doing dishes, I think about like when I unstop the drain and the water goes down, I start thinking about black holes and vortexes and stuff like that. But I was thinking about Mormonism, and it's like, I know Mormonism. I've had all these experiences. I think, there's some awesome creators in this space, but I think I can contribute something to it.
You could have saw the water go down the drain and thought, that's my tithing.
Yeah.
Right.
But, I was thinking it's like kind of an intersection between, scientific principles and Mormonism. There's a worldview that Mormonism builds that's kind of testable. It says these assumptions, it makes these claims that should bear fruit. And if they don't, then, is the assumption or is the claim actually valid? And so I was like, yeah, I could start talking about things like that, and then, the name Masked Mormon kind of came into my mind, and I, was thinking, it's like, what kind of mask would I have? And I asked my wife, the mask mistress, and, the Princess Bride kind of came to mind and stuff like that. And I found a similar mask and cap and stuff like that. And that was the genesis of the channel.
Do you remember what your first episode was going to be?
My very first episode was kind of an introduction, but then early on I did, it was running with the plates. The story of Joseph Smith. He goes to collect the plates one night, and then he has to fight off 3 different people. He's running like 2 or 3 miles,
leaping over fences.
Yep, with this heavy load. And so I'm no stranger to the gym. I'm pretty fit, and so I go and figure out like how much would the plates have weighed if, with the dimensions that are given, and, you have to account for airspace in between the leaves and stuff like that. And if it's not, completely gold, it's a mixture. It's like, okay, I've got a weight of 50 to 60 pounds. Let's go to my gym and borrow some weights. And I took a run around my neighborhood, about a mile loop, with this load that was 50 or 60 pounds. And
everybody looking at you thinking, that must be a Mormon.
My wife filmed me as we went around, and I was kind of scared that here's this guy with a black mask on running around the neighborhood. Are the cops going to get called on me? But it all turned out well.
Is the mask a statement of anonymity?
It's part of just kind of the face of the channel, I guess. I figure, I've shared enough of my life story that anybody who knows me would, it's like, oh, I know who that is. And so it's not so much like, I can't be known, but it's kind of just keeping in line with kind of the channel, I guess.
Well, it's like I knew the
love
difference between the Dread Pirate Roberts and Wesley, even if he was wearing a mask anyway.
Does the Masked Mistress ever come onto your channel?
She's been on once. We did a kind of a interview each other kind of episode a couple years back. That was kind of fun. I haven't had anybody else on because again, my channel is pretty small. And I kind of do it on the side of, all the other stuff I do and stuff. So,
what's one of your favorite podcasts from the last few months?
Oh, from the last few months
or this year or something.
I liked the one I did comparing Joseph Smith to Swedenborg. And then I did one, I think it was this year. I was comparing tithing to a regressive tax and just how expensive tithing is for poor people. And I kind of like, the analytical side of me likes kind of going into the numbers and it's like, okay, if you assume these sorts of things with these rates and stuff like that, what does that mean for somebody, for your median person or whatever?
Right. So like $30,000 of tithing for somebody that makes $300,000 is like nothing, but $3,000 for somebody who's making $30,000 is like a month's worth of food.
Yeah.
Or even more.
And so that's probably one of my favorites just because it kind of, a lot of times a believing member will say, tithing is fair because everybody pays the same rate. Well, it's not fair because everybody pays the same rate. We have a progressive tax system for a reason, because, less wealthy people just get hit by things harder. And so it is with the church. And I think that kind of keeps people, part of the fear of not being with their families forever. And also, I can't afford not to pay tithing, just keeps people afraid enough to keep doing it, even though it'd be in their own best interest to take that 10% and invest it and, or spend it on, needs or whatever the case may be. So
that's the stick. That's the stick of the church. That was the stroke of genius by Joseph Smith to intimidate and scare people into doing whatever it takes to be able to live with their family in the hereafter. And, heaven forbid you should screw all that up by having a cup of coffee or
nice
not
family
paying
you got
tithing.
here. It'd be a pity if something happens to them in the eternities.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, that's the whole thing. That's why the church has their $265 billion
saving
empire.
for a rainy day fund.
Yeah, because all of these people are doing this in the name of fear.
Tithing is too useful. Like even, if you were to try to quote the prophecy that, tithing would one day be unnecessary, it's too useful to the church for just kind of boundary maintenance, right? You have this boundary that kind of you can use as a cudgel to kind of, if you can't get into the temple unless you pay tithing, it keeps people in line.
That prophecy will come true Tuesday.
Yes.
So anyhow, that is how you became the Masked Mormon.
Yeah.
Randy, do you have any other questions?
No, I just want to tell you that I love your story, and I think that you're an amazing human, and what you've been through, and it's just an incredible, by their fruits ye shall know them. And it sounds to me like the Masked Mormon and the Masked Mistress are incredible fruits with an incredible family. And I'm glad that you recognized when you did that you're pretty much spinning your wheels and spending your money with no return on your investment.
Yeah. I was, as you were saying that, I was thinking, to Richard Rohr, he talks a lot about how Mormonism does the first half of life really well, which, in that when I was in the church and it was doing well for me, like, yeah, Mormonism provided a lot of, I guess, social value for me. But then as I started questioning and my beliefs changed, then it didn't anymore. And Mormonism kind of leaves a lot to be desired for so-called second half of life.
Right.
So yeah, so we'll have you on again, I think, because I just thought of something. John Larson did a show about what it would take to do a transoceanic voyage.
I love that episode.
All the things you have to do. So, what would have been different about Lehi or the Jaredites building a rocket ship, right?
Probably technically speaking, that probably would have been just as easy for them to build a spaceship as to build the boats or whatever that they were claimed to have done.
Yeah, so maybe a transoceanic rocket flight would be the title of our show, and we could even say this would mitigate the problems of a transoceanic voyage.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. So that would be good. Any last words for our audience, Masked Mormon?
If you've been following me for the time I've been on, I really appreciate those of you that have been following me. Anybody who's new, I'm glad to have you. I love the interactions that I have with people through the comments and things like that. And I just like the video making and researching and process. So it's fun. Like Mormonism is, even though I don't believe in it anymore, it's still endlessly fascinating.
Do you do some shows that are topical, like some things are in the news, and so you do anything, or
occasionally? I know I responded to Jasmine Rapolli's very terrible response.
Idiocy.
Yeah. But generally, I've mostly I did cover the SEC thing as well at the time, but I generally do just whatever kind of topic kind of strikes my fancy when I start thinking about it. So,
and do you have a schedule?
I post a video about every other week, and I know what I'm getting ready for now is how to feel the spirit as a non-believer. So that'll kind of be an upcoming video.
There you go. Well,
we sure appreciate you coming.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. And head over to the Masked Mormon, try to build up his subscriber base. You are close to being monetized by now, right? You're just a couple 150 away or 250 away or something.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we're not going to get 250 subscribers for you, but maybe 25 if people head on over. And so
anybody who wants to throw me that support, that I'm glad to have the people view. And, like I said, I think I have an interesting point of view on certain things. And so if it entertains people, I'm glad to have them watch.
We may get to 25 subscribers today, but we'll get you 250 on Tuesday.
There you go.
I'll look out for it.
Okay.
Thanks everybody for watching. Like, subscribe, and sharing is caring. And have a great rest of 2025. Bye-bye.